Hello and welcome to another edition of the Mabe Podcast. Today, we are joining my good friend Ann Crowley. Hello, Ann. How are you today?
Hey Andrew, I'm doing very good. Sun's out, so that's good.
Yes, good for this time of year.
Right.
So Ann is a former colleague of mine in Detroit, and she had the good fortune to teach abroad in multiple countries. So I just thought that would be a very interesting topic for us to discuss here, a little bit adjacent to what we normally do. But let's get to it and start with this. And what led you to teach abroad?
I was teaching in Detroit public schools and had done every job you could do there. Teacher, administrator, specialist, parent. And I'd always told my students, because I'd done elementary and middle school, to go outside Detroit and explore the world beyond the city limits, even if you even got into the suburbs, because some children didn't. But especially, go exploring when you get older. And when my youngest reached university, I decided, hey, I got my time in. I'm going to do practice what I preach. I've never been overseas, and I went for it and found a position overseas.
Great. Before we start digging more deeply, where did you teach abroad and what was the process?
All right, I taught in the Abu Dhabi schools in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. Um, and I was actually applying with the Department of Defense in the United States, thinking I'll just go to Afghanistan because I could teach in a tent with a stick in the sand. When you're in Detroit public schools, you can teach anywhere. I've seen I could run fast because these were the qualifications. You had to be able to pack up and run fast. And I'm like, yeah, I'm good with that. But then an organization called Teachaway in Toronto must have trolled people applying in the Middle East. And they reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in a position in Abu Dhabi?" And I'm like, I never even heard of it. I'm like, sure, why not? And it was in the public school system. So, yeah, I had an interview in Chicago, and within a short period of time, I was over in Abu Dhabi teaching in the Abu Dhabi's like New York. I was in I was in Guyathy, Abu Dhabi, because there's an Abu Dhabi, and Guyathy's just kilometers from the Saudi border in the empty quarter. So it was way out there with the Bedouin children at first. I think you
Hmm.
visited me when I was
Yes, I
in
did.
Guyathy, right?
Hmm.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so I took the position. It was wonderful. I ended my last year teaching there in Abu Dhabi proper, which was really New York on like speed. It was incredible. It's just 45 minutes from Dubai. So
Now,
that
when
was
you say
wild.
it was New York on speed, what do you mean by that? Or how does that compare to, because when I visited you, you were in the other city.
Guyathy.
Yeah, and that was a lot
Guyathy.
more, yeah, that was a lot more remote. So what was that like? What did you have compared to when you were in Detroit, both as a
Uh,
person living and as a teacher?
well, as a teacher, of course, they paid for my housing. They paid for my transportation, both ways every year. You got two flights. And they paid for everything. My internet, it was amazing. And I'm talking, I had a lovely apartment in the desert. The conditions I mean, when a Tim Hortons opened up like 40 miles away, everyone flocked to the Tim Hortons. No one could believe we had a Tim Hortons, because it was just very Bedouin, camels, that was it, desert. And the teaching conditions, uh, right now, I'm sure it's improved significantly. I went there in 2014. Uh, they were trying to implement the strategies of Western education from the United States. So they'd send a crew of Emiratis to the United States to look at the schools, and they'd come back, and you come back over the weekend, and the electricity's going through the sand. Everyone, it's just real rough. But you go in the building, and all of a sudden there's like fake little stoves and the wooden washer and dryers in the kindergarten room, And the kids had no idea what that stuff was. They were cooking in a fire and the sand where I was teaching, and they were using the washer and dryer to throw fruits and vegetables in and stuff but it was like they saw this in the United States. This is what you need in a classroom to make it work. So it was just that type of teaching. So you had freedom to like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And I had an Arabic Muslim teacher who taught religion, and I was the teacher teaching English, like subjects in English there. So
What grade level was that?
in Gayatri, it was kindergarten, which I never
Okay.
taught before.
Hmm.
And then in Abu Dhabi proper, it was third grade, and I was the lead teacher of 10 third grade classrooms with 36 children in each. That was
Wow.
wild. That was really quite,
How
and
does that day broken down?
that was, a lot in the international teaching world. They have what you call runners, like people that show up and then the next day they're gone because they go to the airport and sneak out because it's very, if you just got to get out. They just couldn't handle it
Hmm.
but coming from Detroit and having a background of being able to deal with many different cultures and just you met people where they were. So I was very good at doing that. And the younger teachers, they just were coming from wealthier areas of the world, not just USA, but of the
Hmm.
world. And it was hard for them to adjust to uh, the freedom, especially for the young boys in the schools and the discipline of the girls. And it was pretty wild in those buildings. Kids were climbing through the ceilings and stuff in these new buildings. But,
Hmm.
you just had to hold your ground, and I was good about it. And respect goes both ways. You know how it works in the classroom, you know? And also, Andrew, by then I'd had some PSYOP training too, so that helped me with my instructional strategies. And I do see in posts that I look at now, they mention PSYOP as a need for taking a position in their schools.
Oh, wow.
I just saw that last
That's
week. I thought I
exciting.
sent it to you.
Wow.
Maybe I didn't.
Hey, well,
I'm
yeah,
trying to think. It
please.
was in South America, one of those
Okay.
countries.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. So then Abu Dhabi, though, you said was just you mentioned the classes, but then, living there was like living in New York City. Like you were no
Not
shortage
even.
of Western chain restaurants.
No, it was incredible. In my apartment, they were shooting a Mission Impossible film or some crazy film where helicopters were buzzing through our apartment buildings, like between them. But I'd look out on the Arabian Sea from my apartment. It was gold. And when I first got there in Gayatri, they had a limo guy drive us across the desert to get to our school because they kept us in a hotel till housing opened for us. So we were right on the Rotana, in a Rotana, getting full meals, like, oh my God, lobster tail. It was, and I'm like, I'm just a little teacher from Detroit. And really, we were way up there on the scale of being treated quite well.
Hmm.
So, but when you turn 60, they do not give out visas. They're very rare to come by in the Emirates, in the UAE.
So that's what led you to go to Sudan?
Yes, they were going to give me one more year because the school that I was in the UAE was a school combining children from different Emirates so that they would know how to socialize together because just like in the United States, the different tribes have different ways of relating, and the sheikh at the time wanted to make sure the children were encultured with each other. So they wanted me to return, and they were going to maybe, and I was like, I just didn't trust that I'd really get a visa. So I was recruited. They have recruitment fairs. I did go to one. I only went to one. And, you know, Sudan just looked so fascinating to me, and the superintendent reached out and said, "Are you interested?" And I'm like, yeah, sure, and I told him, hey, I'll be 60. And he's like, yeah, we're good with that. And when I got there, I realized why.
Why?
Because it's not Abu Dhabi. I
Yeah.
mean, it was the the difference between the two countries. I would always prefer to go back to Sudan because the people were so beautiful, right? And I was in an embassy school, not a public school. The public schools are very different in Sudan. But the people that I met, the Sudanese people, the women I bike rode with, just they were just so beautiful and loving and generous to the few Americans that were there. In the United Arab Emirates, 90% of the population are expats. Only 10% are Emirati.
Hmm.
Whereas in Sudan, it's the flip. 90% are Sudanese, probably 10% were expats. Maybe because there was, it was a dictatorship my first time there, and there was the democratic revolution that I got out of. And then when I went back, it was another type of dictatorship with military leadership. So, but the people were great. The school system was really the best. Children from all different countries were there and learned to speak English very quickly. Uh, I had a lot of freedom to teach what I wanted to teach. I taught third and fourth grade there. I looped with the one class and took a new fourth grade the last year I was out. Took them camping on the school grounds because the campus was outside. It had wall. It's like a country club in the middle of Sudan, the American Embassy
Hmm.
School for children, because it was just dirt and stuff around it. And the streets, just your typical African streets with crazy driving, tut-tuts, that kind of thing. But the campus had a swimming pool that they built like 2 years before I got there. And I had them camping on the soccer fields like at night. It was great. The kids loved it. We had tents and everything, Bedouin tents. And it was just a lovely experience. And that's why I went back after COVID. I'm like, I'm going back there. And I'm so glad I could get a visa to go back.
So how long you were there for how long before the
I was
pandemic?
there 3 years, and then I
Uh-huh.
came back to the USA because the Democratic Revolution broke out in 2019,
Hmm.
and that was like April or May of that year. I believe it was probably May. And I went to Istanbul and taught online in Istanbul for about 6 weeks, returned to the USA because they're like, didn't know what they were going to do for the next year. And I came back. I got a job here in Dearborn in a Catholic school that they had Muslim children in there, and I wanted to keep up with my Arabic. So the Catholic school had respect for the faith of the community, and I'm like, oh great, I'll take that teaching position. And instead, I was moved into a principalship because they needed one at the school my children had attended prior, and COVID came and locked me into the USA in that leadership role for like 3 years. And then I went back to Sudan for a year.
Okay. Wow. I had some different questions in my head during that time. Um, what was it like? You said it was a dictatorship, but on a given day, on a day-to-day basis, for you as an American who's teaching at the embassy, like, did that make you apprehensive at all, or was it not really a factor for you and your role?
Now, the school was not on the embassy property. They moved the embassy out kind of into the hinterland so helicopters and things like that could land there, small
Hmm.
airplanes. So we were in the city of Khartoum. Um, it really. was not a factor for me. I had my own little car that I was able to buy, and it's a cash economy. So I had bags of cash that I had to take in a tut-tut to go buy a car that was 20 years old. That, because the US had sanctions, nothing was delivered there. There were no McDonald's.
Hmm.
It was definitely Sudanese, you know? And this, like I said, the Sudanese people were just the most kind-hearted, generous people. The tea ladies always recognized me. The men always watched out for me. And I would drive to work and drive some other teachers that wouldn't get cars because they'd get tut-tuts to go. But, I just had a little, it was easy. And yeah, and in fact, when I went back after the COVID time and the revolution had happened right when I left, so when I came back, a lot of the men, the older men in the souk in Omdurman, were
Hmm.
excited to see me because to
That's the
them,
market, right? The souk
huh?
is the market.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
market
Hmm.
on the other side of Khartoum, it's outside, it's just over a little
Hmm.
bridge. But
Yes.
when I came back, they were like cheering, and they always called me their sister, my sister, because it was a sign the US was returning, like
Hmm.
the American is back. And I was real popular, so I never want to come back to USA. But it was, the people were great. Getting supplies was very difficult. So I always would pack getting supplies and food. So when I went, I'd always take extra cases and like I restarted a swim team at the school, and we were going to go to Dubai, and it was like trying to teach kids that are walking their laps, like, no, you can't use your feet on the bottom, like trying to
Hmm.
teach basic strokes. And some students came from other nations, so they knew how to swim. We went to Dubai for a swim meet, but we didn't have bathing suits. They just don't have things like that, especially in a Muslim country. I went to Costco at Christmas, bought a bunch of suits, and they were very generous. Like, oh yeah, we'll help because I told them what I was doing. And when we were in Dubai, there were a few Africans at the swim meet they weren't even from Sudan, but it was a Middle Eastern swim meet. And it was like the first to have an African nation there was rare. And they came to the kids, even though we lost everything. I mean, we were just barely swimming, but it was the experience. And people asked if the suits were specially made, but they were from Costco because of the print. I'm like, and the kids were all happy about their bathing suits. But it was like that. I had to bring journals, crayons, anything I thought, okay, what do I need for them to make my room work for me to get the journals going? Just the whiteboard, what things.
So, so there was no Target or Walmart around the corner you could go to.
Nothing.
What
Are you
could you get
kidding?
if could you get pencils and paper?
You could get you could get pencils and paper at the stationery shops
Hmm.
that just, and when I say stationery, mm, they sold dishes and everything in there.
Hmm.
But you could go in there and they were the kind that, you would just toss here because they don't sharpen well, they don't erase,
Hmm.
the erasers come off. So, and then because you could get some journals, but they opened backwards and everything was in Arabic. So it was like, yeah, I just would fill up cases and bring them with me.
Hmm.
It was just easier. The same with food. I'd bring like dry goods, tons of dry good food, just so I could put water on it and know that I had food in my house, because there would be some rough times sometimes. So.
Yeah. Wow. Well, before we sign off for today, I wanted to hear from you again, because I've heard bits and pieces, but the narrative. So that was in 2019 that you left abruptly?
That was the first time, and that time was not as frightening as the second time because the first time was scary because the streets had many troops from very many nations on it. But it was a democratic revolution. They were going to take the dictator out. And the dictator's nephew was in my classroom, and he lived in the palace. This is fourth grade. Okay, so the US had relationships with whoever was in control there, and they always put their children in the schools. So I got out from there, and there was violence, but it settled down. The UN and the ICC at The Hague all got involved, and the African Union. And then I returned. It was safe enough to return after COVID. I went back, and there was just a very different vibe on the street. Like I could sense it. And there were the two military groups, the SAF and the RSF. RSF was a Russian supported military group, which is there now. And the SAF supported the dictator but turned on him. And those two forces supposedly joined links to support the people that wanted democracy. Well, when I was there, you could just feel it. And I would ride my bike along the Nile as a Western woman. I could ride. I didn't have, like, I would wear covering, but I could wear jeans and long tops and stuff. So they got to know me, like both sides, because they're on both sides of the street. And I thought for me it would work because if things went down, maybe they'd recognize the lady on the street. Seriously. And things started picking up. There was like you can just sense it. And one of the teachers, it was spring break, and I'd just gotten back from the Holy Land, going to Amman and Jerusalem, and it was amazing. And a couple of days after I got back, we were hit because it was all the Muslim and Christian holidays then. Someone said, "Oh, let's go to Egypt or whatever." So I was going to go to Morocco the next week. And a teacher who was going to Dubai came to me. She was a young teacher, and I was the lead teacher because they didn't have a principal in the elementary school. And she shared her partner in the Spanish embassy. They were evacuating out. There's skirmishes up at the border. They're fighting. And we went and asked administration. They're like, no, no, it's all fine. So I always packed my technology whenever I ever left any country to go anywhere, just in
Hmm.
case you never know. You always had your to-go bag. So I took all my technology thinking, well, I'd just go to Egypt for the week and then come back because I was going with some friends, never saw the pyramids. And within 8 hours of being there, uh, and people were leaving in Exodus from Khartoum when we were going to the airport. Like everyone was getting out. The Chinese, everyone was leaving. And I kind of acted like I just gotten back from uh, Jordan. So they know you. The airport's as big as city airport here in Detroit. It's just a little airport. And they thought I was a journalist, not an educator. So I just flashed my credentials real quick, like, I'm still like I'm a journalist, and they let me
Hmm.
through. And I had some issues because I didn't take my yellow fever card, and they're like, you can't travel without it. And I'm like, I never travel with it. Then it was like, nod to some guy to the side, pay him 25 US dollars, stamp, stamp. Here's my yellow fever card. Had to swear on the Koran. It's all true.
Hmm.
But 8 hours after leaving, I was on the Nile River in Egypt, and they're doing dancing and stuff like the native dance. And one of our teacher friends who lived across from the airport sent the friend I was with and me a video of them bombing the airport. And underneath his apartment, there were tanks rolling down. This is 8 hours after we had left. And I'm like, well, that's that. And the superintendent told us, just stay in Cairo. We're headed to you guys and we're going to Zoom. And things went a different direction, but we did Zoom till the end of the school year and had school, and that, everyone was familiar with Zoom because of COVID. And the first revolution I taught online, it wasn't Zoom back then. It was whatever they used at the school, and I can't remember it. So teaching online was normal, especially in the international world, which is so familiar to everyone now. But back then, because there were always things happening politically that you would be told that you need to stay home and teach. And everyone was connected. All the children were connected, you know? And just on that last note, when teaching, a lot of the children did get out of the country initially that were Sudanese, because when I returned, there were very few expats, and the American school was teaching mainly only Sudanese children, and it was the elite Sudanese mostly, and it was also the military's children, the RSF, um, and children got out, and when we got into Zoom, when everyone was located after about 3 weeks into the and it's not a revolution, it's a paramilitary battle. Kids would slowly get on phones to Zoom because they didn't have materials. They'd get outward into the country of Chad. Egypt was big. The Emirates was also big, even Saudi. And they would connect in, and each day I'd have a different amount of children. So you're collecting your kids. And at the very end, there were two little boys. I only had 14 students. Two little young guys we never, were able to locate. And the kids were just so worried about them. Like, and to be there with the children as like, well, we never heard from Mohammed and Ahmed, And it's like, well, yeah, they were going somewhere else. Like, I'm sure their fathers have them because they were with their moms living. It was difficult. So, yeah, that was a time.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. Any last words of advice for someone who's thinking of teaching abroad?
Hey, go for it. It's a wonderful experience, and children are the same everywhere. If you can manage a classroom well in the USA, you can manage a classroom anywhere, really. Children, they're just so outstanding. They're so forgiving of each other, even though they're nasty to each other too. They're great. You know what it's like, but they're
Yes.
the best. So you have to love what you do, and it'll get you everywhere and anything that you need.
All right. Thanks, Ann.
All right.